So if you're like me, you have some level of appreciation for history. There are things in history that I think are worth knowing, but one of the areas of history that I don't concern myself with and I don't believe is worth knowing is the history of video games. I don't think the history of video games is worth knowing because usually involves a fucking wank fest for people that are retro game fanatics and continue to fucking wax on about nostalgia and shit to me that doesn't really matter. There are plenty of games that I've played in my history as a gamer that to me are important. But are they worth remembering? Probably not. Are the people that made them worth remembering? Well, are they still making games? If not, probably not worth remembering, in my opinion. But let's hear a lecture by Professor Whyte here about the importance of women in gaming and the history of women in gaming.
The video game industry, just like the movie industry, the music industry, the sports industry, and the industry, is largely dominated by men. Now, since 2009, the amount of female developers in video games have more than doubled to 22%, which is good news. However, they still make up less than a quarter of the industry.
Sure, you could be correct, and one would wonder why gender parity matters so much to so many, but let's just take a moment to point out the fact that women are favored over men in tech.
What's worse is that female characters star in less than 10% of all games.
You know you have a rock solid fucking argument when the game you cite is Beyond Two Souls. Literally one of the worst games ever made and that I ever had the misfortune of playing. And this is coming from a fan of Heavy Rain.
That's the same percentage of cabinet members Berlusconi hasn't tried to molest yet.
Il maggiore perseguitato dalla magistratura di tutte le epoche, di tutta la storia degli uomini in tutto il mondo.
Now this episode isn't here to explore Gamergate, start a flame war, or even change the world. We're leaving all of that to Kirk Cameron.
I'm trying to focus, I'm focusing.
Same place. Too funny. Here we go. Quiet down, please.
I have to look at him.
I can't look at him.
Would you fuck off with these cringeworthy memes, dude?
We're here today to explore some of the first portrayals of women in video games and pay respect to the trailblazers who became pioneers in the industry. After all, women now make up almost 50% of all gamers, and it's never too late for a little herstory lesson. Now, unless we can apply sexuality to the paddles and balls and Pong, the first true female protagonist in a video game appeared in 1981's Ladybug.
Okay, stop. Are you seriously saying that the gender of a fucking bug defines representation in video games? I mean, I think all of this is stupid, considering we're talking about fictional content, but really, a fucking pixelated bug. Hey guys, you know what? I bet you this Pong paddle doesn't believe in a god. Oh my god, first representation of atheism in a video game. Whoa, we made it! We made it! Progressivism wins again! Balls in the USA!
The game was a mild homage ripoff of Pac-Man that featured a ladybug walking around a maze eating up dots while avoiding contact with other insects. What made it unique was the paddleboard system that allowed you to block off paths from incoming enemies. What's bizarre is that the second female protagonist in a video game is also Pac-Man related, this time in a hack that eventually blossomed into Miss Pac-Man. Miss Pac-Man was an American-developed port of the original game, featuring much faster gameplay, kinda like if the original Pac-Man had been taking motivational lessons from Shia LaBeouf.
There's ways to incorporate memes into a video that can be funny or complement the topic, but so far I'm just bored.
Say what you will about female-driven games not being as commercially successful, but at the time, Miss Pac-Man was the best-selling American-made arcade game in the world. Not to mention, not a single person back then was complaining about her body image or liberal eating habits. It was also in the early 80s that Carol Shaw and Donna Bailey made waves for becoming the first female video game developers despite the handicap of not having penises. Carol went on to create some timeless classics like Happy Trails and River Raid. Donna would go on to co-create one of the most popular arcade games of all time, Centipede. Around the same time as Centipede, female protagonists began to appear in a few more games. In 1985, Sega released the first female action hero, Ninja Princess. While this was a huge step forward, the strong female hero must have broken a few people's brains because she was transformed into a male character for the home console release. While the Ninja Princess was a powerful warrior, she was unfortunately a victim of over-sexualization.
Okay, fucking stop. First, this looks like fan art, But regardless of that, who the fuck are you to judge this artist's work? Second, women can dress however they wish, and artists have every right to make their characters as slutty as they like, as they are the artists, and you are the cunt with the microphone. You and I are in no position to shit on those with actual fucking talent. Third, is this how you expect artists to portray female protagonists? I bet you would say that I'm being hyperbolic, but am I really that far off from your expectations? When this image is ever so ghastly to you, what the fuck is your standard then?
Female characters, even when they're a lead, are often sexualized. While it's wonderful to see Lara Croft in a bikini, it is wonderful, not all gamers are interested in playing as that kind of a hero. And while male characters often get stuck in the Adonis stereotype themselves, they're typically not running around in thongs.
I bet you think you just made a pretty solid point here, but sexuality is interpreted. Here's an image that I'm going to be using in a future video of the WWE wrestler Seth Rollins. Now, would you say that this portrayal is sexual? I wouldn't, because I'm not attracted to men. However, a woman might disagree, or maybe she doesn't. How the fuck would you know either way unless you had already made assumptions about what is going on in the minds of every person on the fucking planet? We have this character from Metal Gear. Her portrayal could be sexual, it could be innocuous, or it could be fucking anything because we're talking about interpretation. Not every game has fan service. Not every bit of fan service is done to sexualize a character, but rather for comedic purposes. Or maybe it was, and I just interpreted it different than somebody else. To summarize, you are an authoritarian cunt.
Now, most of you will probably be too young to remember Sierra Games or even the point-and-click adventure genre, but in the mid-80s to early 90s, it was one of the most popular genres in video games. And the biggest company behind it was co-founded by a woman named Roberta Williams. No, not Robin Williams' long-lost twin, but rather a programming genius responsible for some of the most beloved series of all time. Space Quest, King's Quest, Onion Quest. Okay, that last one was fake, but they were some of the most beloved franchises of all time, and a lot of them were co-created by a woman. That brings us to one of the most breakthrough female protagonists in the history of video games, and no, I'm not talking about Angelina or Jolie. In 1986, Nintendo released Metroid for the NES. It was a revolutionary game that featured true open-world exploration and allowed gamers to choose a non-linear path to get to the end. It also featured multiple endings, something that would become a staple in the industry. But all of that being tossed aside, what it truly revolutionized was the fact that if you beat the game in under 5 hours, you would be rewarded with one of the biggest twist endings in video games. You had been playing as a girl the entire time. Nowadays, this scandal isn't enough to make Bill Cosby get out of bed, but back in the 80s, it was one of the biggest revelations of this century.
That's great for dipshit gamers in the 80s. We're not in the 80s anymore, nor are we in the 1780s. Your estimation of women, though, honestly is. My advice? Try to make it ahead another century and discover individualism. Treating women as equals is not a new concept because gender does not fucking matter. You've listed women that made it into the industry because they accomplished something. They did the work and were rewarded for it. If you make a game and it's good, I like you and I want you to stay in the industry. If you make a game that's shit, I don't like you, and I want you to leave the industry. Why? Because the competent should be rewarded, and the fucking incompetent should be tossed out of the fucking industry to never defraud consumers again.
Flipping the entire script on its head by turning the protagonist into a woman went a long way to shatter gender stereotypes. The development team claimed it had been heavily influenced by the film Alien, and thought it would be a great twist to reveal the hero had been a girl the entire time. Now, nearly 20 years later, there have been some great positive steps in the right direction for female characters, but there's still a massive way to go.
Why am I not surprised? A fucking Telltale game. The minute Telltale stops releasing weak, badly produced titles, I'll agree with you. Clementine does not save the second season of The Walking Dead in the same way that Fiona isn't saving Tales from the Borderlands, in the same way that Mira could not possibly save Game of Thrones. And by the way, I like these characters. I really do. But they aren't preventing Telltale from going down the same road as BioWare and destroying their own company with passionless, uninspired, badly produced shovelware with identity politics mixed in. This isn't about the skin color or gender of a character, but rather the quality of the fucking game. If the game is shit, no amount of vagina presented is going to prevent it from being what it is, an awful title.
And don't get me wrong, I personally love seeing outrageously scantily clad female characters in games, but I can only speak for the male heterosexual population that plays these things, and as we mentioned before, nearly half of gamers are women. That doesn't even put into account gay or transgender players who have virtually no representation in games at all.
Get ready for some controversial statements. I think the LGBT community is getting far more representation in video games than the actual percentage of the community that they supposedly compose, or their share in the market as consumers. I have no problem with LGBT characters being in a game, but to say that the industry lacks titles that offer such representation is a bald-faced fucking lie. The most mainstream titles being produced right now offer every bit of customization possible outside of shit so niche that it is yet to leave the collective mind that is Tumblr. Face it, pal, you got fucking nothing to say about representation in video games.
And to the women who have battled to break through the glass ceiling, which in this industry is more like a 100-foot glass penis, I thank you for giving us some great gaming adventures and hopefully a lot more to come.
Polish that armor, buddy, because that was a fucking pathetic statement to end on. If you are obsessed with identity politics, buy titles based on that ideology, but would you stop with the moralistic shit that the industry needs to hire more women, or that poor portrayals harm the fragile ego of women? Each time someone makes women the victim of all things and throughout history, it makes women as a group in the here and now look like special needs children that require my help to accomplish anything. Either women are capable of being on par with men, or they're not. I believe gender defines nothing about an individual other than some basic biological factors. To quote a great man, he who would learn to fly one day must first learn to stand and walk and run and climb and dance. One cannot fly into flying. AKA, any individual that wants to be an artist in this industry must do it based on their own knowledge and gradual ability, rather than getting some position they haven't earned because they lack a dick.
You'll do this again. Time is a flat circle.
What's that, Nietzsche? Shut the fuck up.